Great. So, welcome everyone. This is Imirt Inspire 7, and our guest tonight is Jeff Vogel from Spiderweb Software. Hi, Jeff.
Hi.
Thanks so much for joining us.
No, it's my pleasure.
You're dialing in from Seattle. Probably the rest of us
Yes.
are in Dublin, but actually, maybe there's a few people abroad. Um, so, generally what I do, my first question is kind of just very briefly, if you could tell us kind of how you got into games. How did you end up making games?
Well, I was born in 1970, so one of the things I consider myself hugely fortunate about is that I've been able to be there for like basically the entire history of this art form. Starting, I remember when Pong was new. I remember when Space Invaders came out, and so on. And I started playing video games in the mid 70s as a little kid, and it was a medium that just initially completely fascinated me. And I learned to program in about 1980, and the first thing I did was I started writing games. I learned how to program a new thing, and I'd write a game using that just for, just out of pure fascination. It was what I loved to do. I learned my first, I learned BASIC in about 1980. I learned Pascal in 86 and C in about 90. And all of this time I'm writing games whenever I get the chance. That was when I started to learn C, for example. I was like, okay, I need to actually write something to make sure I'm learning this. And so I'd just write a game and I'd write another game. And
Do you still
I
have those games?
knew when I was a teenager that was something I'd love to do for a living. It was just immediately like, this is what I want to be when I grow up. And then in 1992, I went to grad school in applied mathematics, which, as grad students often find, once they're grad students, they really don't want to be grad students. And to preserve my sanity, I took some time off, and in the evenings, I started writing a role-playing game, because role-playing games have always been my particular fascination. And I wanted to try to write a real one, just on something on my bucket list. Before I died, I wanted to try to write a real game, and so I wrote a game called Exile: Escape from the Pit, and I wrote it. I released it as what was called shareware, a term that is now largely and happily forgotten. And people started buying it. Yeah, who knows why? And I started making money. I was like, wait a second, I hate grad school, and so I quit grad school and started selling games full time. And I wrote another game, and then another, and then another, and people kept buying them because I apparently have something for a knack for writing role-playing games.
Cool.
And now it's 2016.
Um, so you said you've liked role-playing games. What was the first earliest standout RPG you played?
There's two of them. There used to be in around 1980 a game for Apple and maybe other platforms called Eamon, Eamon, and it wasn't something that was sold in stores. It was something that was sold from person to person, and it was a scenario creation system. So there was like a basic hub. This is a text adventure. It has
Yeah.
statistics and weapons and attacks, but it's all text. And you'd be in this hub, and then you'd put in a floppy disk with an adventure someone wrote, and you'd play through that, and you'd take out the disk, and you'd put in another disk. And so you could take one character through all of these different adventures, which was all just written by hobbyists and traded back and forth,
Wow.
which was sadly largely forgotten because it was, super cool and groundbreaking in a lot of different ways. The first real pro fantasy role-playing game I played was Wizardry Proving Grounds of the Mad Overlord, which one of the seminal, if not the original game of the genre as we understand it now. That was in about 1983, and
What what
Wizardry was fantastic.
what were you playing
And
that on?
an Apple II Plus.
Oh, cool.
I wasn't up to, we weren't up to the 2E or the 2C. We were a 2 Plus family, but that satisfied our needs.
So around that time, so I was born in 1980. Around that time, we got a ZX Spectrum. That's what I remember, and that had
Oh,
basic.
okay, I remember those.
That had basic.
Those were cute.
Yeah. But the fact that it had basic just meant, to use it, you kind of understood that it was programming. And that's something that's
So
a
if
little
memory
missing
serves,
these
the
days.
big thing about the Spectrum was that it was very inexpensive. It was like in
Yes,
the States, I think it was about $100, which for a computer was
crazy.
just astonishingly cheap.
But it was just a little keyboard with the small computer built in. You had to supply your own
Yeah,
TV and tape player to
it,
use it.
it was tiny and it could do almost nothing, but it could do a fair amount for the price. And there was this huge hacking community around just taking this silly little box. And it's hard to put into words how bizarre it was in 1980 for a computer to be $100 or in the 80s. And there was these really active hacking communities just to say, let's take this little box and really put its paces and see through what it can do. I think the last thing I heard about it, maybe about a decade ago, was that some crazy people had gotten a version of Doom to run on it,
That would
but
be
with all
great.
text graphics.
Um, all the magazines at the time, we used to get ZX Spectrum magazines. They had a huge section at the end with games. You could, basic code that you could type in and make simple games.
Yeah,
It was amazing.
that's how they did. They just put the code in the game and you typed it in, and then you
Yeah.
missed one of the 500 lines and you had to debug it, and that was how you learned to do that.
Or they had a typo. That was always fun. So you kind of were always making games. Do you still have those games, or they lost to time?
Oh no, no, they were all on cassette tapes and the occasional floppy disk, and those just got put in a cardboard box and thrown out a long time ago. And I don't really miss them. It was kid work. It was fun and charming, but I'm already, you can see behind me, I'm already a person who likes to save and collect things. So any time that someone takes something of mine and throws it in the trash, it's a blessing. It's just that much less crap in my house.
I'm just going to pause for a sec there and just remind everyone, if you have any questions for Jeff, just fire away into chat there, and I'll kind of moderate them and ask Jeff when the time is right. But just throw questions in there. Jeff, have a look if you want, but I'll basically ask all the questions on behalf of people watching just for our audio
Okay,
recording
I,
later
I
on.
can't see that text feed right now, and honestly, I don't need to see. If I
Yeah,
try to
no, you
find
don't
it,
need
it'll
to.
probably
Fine.
close the window and blow everything up. So just go ahead and ask me
Yeah,
anything that
I'll,
sounds good.
I'll basically watch that and I'll ask any questions that come up. But I actually have a
Okay.
whole page full of questions, so as
Shoot.
as usual. So I've been following your game. So I remember when Exile came out. Um, I
Oh
played
wow, yeah.
I played it. I downloaded the shareware, version of that to, I think possibly our Windows 3.1 PC, but at worst our Windows 95 PC, and
The
played
first
the
one
hell
was
out of it.
definitely out for Windows. I am one of the few people who can say they've written and shipped games on Windows 3.1, which is a bit of I take a bit of weird pride in.
That's pretty cool. And I remember it being shareware, and this was pre-internet, certainly in Ireland. It was just a little bit of internet, I think, in the US, in those, funny closed community internets. Um,
Yep.
and so, the idea, I was 15, of buying this game was impossible. So there was
Oh,
no
oh
way,
yeah.
there was no way to buy it easily. It wasn't in the shops, and there was no real internet. Now, we did get online around then, with dial-up and stuff, but it wasn't that, prevalent. There was certainly no buying of stuff online in Ireland yet.
Yeah.
Um,
Oh, you would have had to mail me a check, an international check, and it would have gotten to me after 2 weeks, and I would have gotten it and taken it to my bank and argued about whether it was in fact a check with a teller who probably did not know Ireland is a thing that really exists.
and at
And
the
then
time we
eventually
invented
they
our
might
own
give me a
currency.
fraction of that money. But by that time I already would have mailed you on paper with a stamp a key which would have gotten to you 2 weeks later. I think that a lot of people pirated my games in Europe and all over the world just because the process of paying for them was so stupid. And I can't really blame them.
And it was hard to work
Um,
around that, wasn't it?
what?
You kind of didn't have any other option. It wasn't easy to
Oh,
do.
exactly. Yeah, it was. I mean, before the internet was really big, the way shareware passed around was on 3.5 inch discs. They were called floppy disks. They're about this big, and you'd go to the mall or the store, and there'd be like a rack of shareware discs, and you'd pay up to even like $10 for a disc with a demo on it. And you'd go home and you'd play it and you decide you like it, and then you realize it was a demo and you had to pay more money, and then you would go to the author and send the author a really nasty, angry email because you thought when you paid $10 for the demo that you got the whole game, and yeah, there are probably people out there who are still really super angry at me over that.
So you got the earliest hate mail possible on the internet then?
It was on paper.
Oh,
It was, they really, really wrote it out longhand. When you get flamed with pencil on paper, you really feel it.
I look
That
forward to
person
it.
really cared.
I haven't got that one yet. So when you made that, that was all entirely by yourself, that first game?
Not quite. My wife at the time did the art. She did just some really charming, simple pixel art drawings for everything. And then, as always, all of my testing is done by volunteers. These, awesome, selfless people who volunteer their real life time to play my games and find the many ways in which they're broken. So I've never done anything entirely by myself, but mostly by myself. I do all of the design, all of the art and sound direction. I do most of the sounds myself, which is why they're not very good. Most of, always the vast majority of the actual creation of the game is done by me.
And to me, that sounds crazy because making a game today by yourself is a huge undertaking, and there's so many tools and engines to make that simpler. Back then, you basically wrote everything yourself, I'm guessing.
Oh, but that was the fun. The the actual coding part, the just sitting down and barfing out a bunch of C or C++ code, is for me the fun part. It's really neat to sit down and work 15 minutes programming in a thing, and then running the game, and then the thing is working, and then there's just a real rush of immediate accomplishment and mental satisfaction in that I don't get from almost entirely the rest of it. The vast majority of my design time is creating the scenario, like the actual adventure, like creating the dungeons, placing the orcs, writing the dialogue, scripting the encounters. And that takes the most of my time, and it's kind of just the most grueling, painstaking work, because it's one of those things where you can work for days and days and you don't see any result. And, and it's painstaking. It's writing dialogue I just find really exhausting, which is sort of a pity because for
And
a lot
there's
of people that's their favorite thing about my stuff.
and the style of game you make, there's a lot of dialogue.
Each game I write has about a novel worth of dialogue in it. Sometimes it's a shorter novel, sometimes a longer novel, but it's a lot of words. And I never really have enough time to get those words up to the level where I want them to be. But I always struggle to achieve basic adequacy.
Do you feel like you've improved?
Oh, absolutely. Oh yeah, even now 20 years on, I every time I write a game, I try some new things. I try some new things in my workflow. I try learning some new code, try to put new interface improvements in. I go out and play other games and see what interface things people have figured out and put them in my stuff. Like in Avadon 3, which is the game I'm writing now, I'm scheduling and doing how I write the dialogue in an entirely different way, which I absolutely loved. After 20 years, I've completely reworked how I make a character's dialogue, and
And do you
it's so
build
much.
it yourself
I'm
still?
sorry, what?
You using a tool or are you
What?
sorry, are you
No,
using
no,
a tool there?
just my workflow, just the
Okay.
order in which I do the steps.
Ah, okay,
It's
cool.
nothing that will be visible to the end user, except in the sense I think the conversations will flow in a better, sort of more natural way. I mean, it's always pretty still.
One of us has just gone. Oh, it's me. Sorry, my connection is gone wonky. Can anyone hear me?
I can hear you.
Oh, I couldn't hear you for a second there.
Oh, okay.
But it seems to be okay now. Hopefully it will continue because things look a bit funny on my end. So I may drop in and out for a minute here.
Okay. I'll just talk a lot.
Well, if it's working, it seems to be okay at the moment. Yeah, okay, let's just keep going. Sorry, you were saying there, about writing things differently? Because I was just
Oh yeah,
think,
just as an example, or I mean, it's such a big field, and the games are so complicated, and there's so many jobs and so many different ways to approach them that I think that I'll be learning and figuring out new stuff all the way through. In 3 years or so, I've been using the same engine and the same basic design for a long time, probably well longer than I should. And I'm going to do a whole new interface, a whole new presentation, get the art all thrown out and redone from scratch. And then that's going to be a whole new thing. You know, once you start from scratch in terms of the game system and structure and everything, I'm gonna have to figure out all kinds of stuff, and that'll be great. That's one of the few things that still has fun and surprise in it for me. I
getting to
mean,
start with a
after
whole.
20 years of anything, you'll develop sort of a sense of routine.
That makes sense. This kind of ties into one of our questions here from Andrew Hines. He says, out of curiosity, after you mentioned all the languages you learned over the years, how do you make your games these days? So what kind of language are you working in?
C++. Just straight up C++. I write it on a Macintosh using like a very simple graphics engine I purchased quite a few years ago, but then all of my stuff is layered on top of that. So I do have the source code of a prepackaged engine, but it is a really simple engine. All it does is it pumps out the sound and it pumps out the graphics, and then everything else about it, all of the timing, all of the code, all of the interface elements, all of the event handling is handled by my code.
Yeah,
And I code it all on Mac, and I port it to Windows. Porting to Windows only takes a few days because I've been done it so many times. I really have that part down to a science. And after the game ships, I put it on iPad because I think iPads are cool. And then that's pretty much it. But yes, all C++ except when on a Macintosh, I use the Macintosh extensions, which are called Cocoa. Um, that's not the newest, most up-to-date version of the. I can't keep track of Apple. I can't keep track of what Apple wants me to do. I'm I, I'm just holding on to C really, really tightly because that's what I know how to do.
and it's pretty portable.
Very much so.
I remember maybe last year you said Apple changed their systems and you basically just pulled your games because it was going to be too much work to try and support their new,
Yeah,
something new,
that
like
was
the new OS version or something.
oh God, that was a disaster. What happened was, and this is part my fault. I finished a game, Avernum 2 for the iPad, submitted it to Apple. Apple approved it. It was ready to go on the store. It was like gonna, it was they approved on Monday and it was going to go up on the store on a Friday, something like that. And on Wednesday, they released a new operating system which completely broke the game. And I didn't check it. What I would have done if I was a real developer with conscientiousness and skills would have been on Thursday to upgrade to the new operating system and test the game, and I could go, oh my God, and halt the release. But I did not do that. But on the other hand, I did kind of have the rug pulled out from under me, and that's a problem a lot of developers on iTunes have had, is that there have been a lot of stories over the last 1 or 2 years of like far higher profile iPad and iOS apps than mine being pulled because they don't work anymore and because they don't have the developers don't have the ability or the interest in making them work. Square Enix, I think all of their games on iTunes blew up, and they were like, "Oh God, what are we doing?" So that's still kind of an ongoing process because if you program for Apple any devices any length of time, you will know that every 3 or 4 years they break everything,
Which is
and
kind of
it's
mean.
it's kind of like running on a treadmill developing for Apple devices.
So, Windows have always spent, or Microsoft have spent a lot of effort on keeping backwards
Oh yeah,
compatibility. A lot of effort.
yeah. Microsoft, yeah, developing for Microsoft, whatever else good or bad or say about you can say about them, and you can say a lot, is that their astonishing dedication to backwards compatibility. That I can take my Windows 7 laptop and fire up a game from 1999 and it'll still run fine. Where if you put a program from 1999 anywhere near a new Macintosh, the machine will just catch on fire.
And then you have to buy a new one. It kind of works. for them.
It's a great business model if you can swing it.
um, so just want to very quickly, you've been very prolific writer of games. I just counted 21 different titles there. Um,
A
uh,
lot.
that's a lot. That's pretty much one a year. Almost one a year. There's only a couple of years where you didn't release a game. Um, that's incredible. Do you not feel like you're maybe, do you not feel worn out by this? Or is it
Oh,
just,
I'm exhausted, but I'm also compelled. It's I think that writing computer games at all is one of those fields where it's if you write games, you're not a programmer so much as an artist. It's not as much a business atmosphere as a creative one. If you want to go into writing games for a living, it's very similar to saying you want to be an actor for a living or a musician for a living. It's not impossible. God knows plenty of people do it, but it has to be kind of a calling. It has to be something where you really couldn't be entirely happy or whole if you were doing anything else. And that goes doubly true for indie games, because writing indie games for a living is a rough road. Sometimes it's a tiny bit easier, and sometimes it's a tiny bit harder, but it's always tough. And I think that if you want to, one of the first things you have to do is you have to find your process. You have to find the technique that works for you personally, and do that. And I figured out very early on, I started in 94, I went full-time in 95, and I'd really figured out by 96 or 97 how I work. I'm a loner. I work by myself for the most part. I work fast. I would much rather spend 3 years writing two pretty good games than 3 years writing one really polished game. I like writing lots. I like writing. I like making stories. I like making lots of stories. So I'd rather have my games be a bit scruffy and I get to tell more stories than my games are a lot shinier and glossier and have nicer graphics and stuff. And I get to tell fewer stories. And I hasten to point out that this is not necessarily a smart decision. It is possible that if I spent 3 years on every game and made something really polished every time, I would be a much more famous person and a much more successful person. If I hired 2 or 3 more people and added that, I might actually have a real company that people have heard of now. I'm
on the,
not saying that what I
uh,
did was the best way. What I am saying is that what I did was my way. It was the way I had to do it to stay in my business. Because, I'm tired, I'm old, I'm burned out. I'm a middle-aged guy who's been doing the same job for 20 years. I'm supposed to be a little frayed around the edges, but it is still, here in 2016, the thing I'm compelled to do and the way I'm compelled to do it. And I'm incredibly lucky that I get to make a living submitting to my compulsions.
and you mentioned there, you rather make more games than spend more time on each game, but there's obviously a nice effect there is that you've been so prolific, you have the huge kind of backlog of games, and you've done this, like when the iPad came out, you got to re-release some of your games for the iPad.
Oh, yeah.
I mean, that's
The
amazing.
Yeah, it helps to maintain morale and to keep going. It does help to have new goals and new interests and new things. At when you write a game and get it up working on a screen, there's a magic in that and a joy in that to look at a thing and go, I made that, I created that, or my team, I helped make that, my team created that, and I had a key part in that process. But like every other thrill in life, it fades over time, and so I'm always looking for things to bring the excitement. And even now, I have 5 games out for the iPad. Even now, when I get the game running on an iPad and I hold that thin little panel in my hands and the game's running on it, I still feel a kind of magic in that. And those little moments of satisfaction do a lot to help keep you going or help to keep me going. Because, having being born before the era where a computer was something a human being could plausibly own, you know, iPads are still kind of like miracles to me. iPads are literal Star Trek future.
It's true. And easy for us to forget when we're just, leaving them, abandoned around the house sometimes.
Yeah, sometimes it's always good to take a moment and look around at the stuff around you and go, wow, this is amazing.
So when you started, okay, we kind of mentioned this, the shareware model of making basically a big demo, and that was just something people could play, and then initially taking checks, and then you were really well poised, I would say, with 95, 96, to have games you could start selling online. Um, did you start that from the beginning, or was that just by like 2000s you started take taking payments online and emailing people keys?
So in 1994, there was the internet was going pretty good in '94. There was the World Wide Web hadn't really taken off, but hardly anyone was on the internet. It was just people in the military, people in big business, people at universities. But those people bought games, so that helped stay in business. I made a website for real in about '97. It was on AOL. You can still find it on the internet, Wayback Machine. God, it's so hilariously crude. And about '97, that was when I started wanted to take credit cards. So I started going around to banks and credit card service offerers and say, hey, I'm running this business online. I'm making some money. I want to start taking my own credit cards. And that process took months because at that point, I could not convince anyone I was talking to that it was possible to run a profitable business on this thing called the internet. So I had conversation after conversation with confused bankers trying to explain to them that no, I'm not a con artist. This isn't a front for importing cocaine from Bolivia. I am in fact writing these games and selling them to humans for our Earth dollars, and let me take credit cards, man. And it took months before finally a company was willing to say, yeah, okay, we'll let you take credit cards, but what, we use a Macintosh? Well, we need to rewrite all of our software for that, so you're going to have to wait a few more months, which I did, and they eventually, they set me up, and until the software was ready, they actually sent me a point-of-sale machine, like one of those swiping machines that I kept next
Wow.
to my desk in my apartment, and then when someone would call me on the phone and place an order, and I would be typing their numbers into the credit card to run the credit card machine. It was kind of ridiculous and hugely time consuming. And one of the things I always tell young developers is that if you're on Steam, Steam's not perfect. Steam can make mistakes. It's okay to be mad at Steam sometimes. But never forget that Steam is a limitless bag of miracles. That the stuff that Steam takes care of you for Steam and iTunes and
Mm.
God.com and Xbox Live and all of the online stores, the things that they take care of you for you, if you do them yourself, are just this incredibly time-consuming morass. The load that being on a service like that takes off of you is you can't really appreciate how amazing that is until you've lived through it. All of the services take 30%, and my God, I'm happy to pay that 30%. Anything to have to keep from having to talk to a bank to troubleshoot my credit card connection again.
So when did you first start selling on Steam? Because it wasn't that straightforward to get on Steam in the early days.
Yeah, it was tough. It was like Charlie and the Chocolate Factory. Getting on Steam was like getting Willy Wonka's golden ticket. You had to meet the right person and have the right conversation. I managed to get on really early, like six years ago, like just at the point where indie games were starting to go crazy. And I had a marketing person who was really awesome and got me in. So I applied to get my game Avadon the Black Fortress onto Steam just on their online site, and they rejected me. And then I had a marketing person who got me actually in a room with a Steam person. They got me this meeting, and my response was, I don't want to do that. I'm scared. I don't want to get in a car. I don't want to drive somewhere. I don't want to give a presentation to a
And
stranger. I
they're
like being alone in my room where it's quiet and peaceful.
they're near
And
you.
then and then
They're,
I sacked up and I put together a presentation. I drove to Bellevue and I went to Steam's secret offices. Steam does not broadcast the location of their actual business area because they're smart, because they don't want crazy people walking in all hours of the day to ask if the cake is a lie or not. So I went to Valve and I gave my presentation, and then they were like, well, yeah, this game's actually pretty cool, but $20 is too much. Would you sell it for 10? And I was like, would that get me on Steam? And they're like, well, yeah. And I was like, sure, sell it for whatever you want. And then I was on Steam, and it was fantastic. It's always been fantastic. Being on Steam changed my life. I, I went from this obscure misfit making a moderate living to this obscure misfit making a very good living. Steam, I mean, at this point, if you're selling PC games or even Mac games, you, you really should be on Steam. It is not impossible to make a living without being on Steam. God knows I did it for 15 years. You don't have to be on Steam, but you probably should. All things being equal, your business is going to do better if you're on Steam. And there are other services like that too. I have to plug Humble at this point because Humble Bundle, Humble Store, Humble Widget are terrific services, and any new developer should look into them. Especially, I love the Humble Widget, which is a thing you can put on your own website to take credit card sales yourself. Where once again, before being able to take credit cards on my website took months, and even after I got the credit card account, we had to custom code like JavaScripts and Perl scripts to take the credit cards. But now with the Humble Widget, you
They're
just
really
go to Humble
developer friendly.
and type in some things, and they give you some code, and you put it on, and boom, you're accepting credit cards on your
Yep.
website. Once again, it's a miracle to me.
So I always say it couldn't be easier now, or it's never been easier to sell things online, games.
That is correct.
Humble Widget is
That
how I
is
started
absolutely.
out, and then once we got greenlit, and released, we were on Steam as well. Um, and iOS, when did that happen for you? Was that around that time as well with Avadon? I certainly
Yeah,
got
yeah,
Avadon on the
all of
iPad.
that happened at the same time. That was just about the time that the first iPad came out. And I heard about the iPad, and I was like, okay, it's a big iPhone, whatever. And I walked into an Apple store, and the iPads were there, and I picked one up, and I held it, and in like 5 seconds, I was like, I have to start developing for this.
Yeah.
Because I could see there was a lot of money in it, and two, as I said before, there's just a kind of magic to it, and I think they're neat. There's not really that much money in it anymore. The first couple games we did for iPad did really well, but now it's an old story what the iOS store is like. It's just a bloodbath. It's so difficult to get any traction at all.
I
And
heard
we
there's
still
only
make our. I'm sorry.
I heard there's only about 500 new games released each day on iOS. That can't be too much.
It is an exuberant platform. It sits atop an infinite river of money, but that's where the big kids play. To get something really established, you have to spend infinite money on marketing. You have to have real teams, stuff like that. At this point, iPad for us is a hobby. I finished my game. I got my system down, so I ported it to iPad in a fairly short amount of time. I release it, and I don't really market it, and only our fans buy it. But that's, it's a few tens of thousands of dollars, and that's pretty good pay for a hobby. So I'm going to keep writing for iPad for a long time, as porting is relatively quick, and as long as I have a fan base that'll buy a couple thousand copies of it.
So your primary market, you'd say, is still PC and Mac?
Yes. For the longest time, it was about PC and Mac 50-50, but with the shift to Steam, the vast majority of our money now comes from PC, but we still make really good money off of Macs. If we lost Macs, our business would really feel the hit.
I don't think they're going away. Maybe hitting Steam just exposed you to more PC people, so there was more growth there.
Exactly. Yeah. Yes.
Yeah.
Steam has milking money out of PC people down to an absolute science. And one of the things when indie developers ask is that what I say is when Steam suggests something to you, just go ahead and say yes, because when Steam suggests something that they think will make more sales, they're suggesting it because it'll make them money too. Steam wants the people who put games on it to make lots of money, because then they make lots of money. They take enough of a cut that it's really worth it for them to give you the correct advice. So plus also everyone I've ever met who worked at Valve has just been really cool and sharp and together. That's one of the things I love about working in this industry, is that the people I meet tend to be really cool. Everyone I've met who works at Humble is great. Everyone I've met who works at Valve is great. I've never met anyone who works at Apple because I'm too much of an insect to be noticed by them. But by and large, compared to other industries, if writing indie games, the way you get paid is really transparent.
What do you think about this? Is something I think about a lot. Um, Kind of the way people buy PC games now on Steam in particular. It seems to be very discount based because people have too many
Yeah.
games.
Oh my God. Pricing and sales and discounts is a really fascinating topic. One I've actually written about. I gave a big talk about it in October on YouTube. If you want, I can take a moment to look for what to Google for that. Is like
I'll
Jeff
find it.
Vogel
I've
talk.
watched
I'm
it.
sorry,
I've watched that talk. It's amazing. I'll find it here.
but yeah, the whole indie games being a big thing is new, and there's so much that we haven't figured out yet. And one of those things is pricing and sales and bundles. How do you price your game initially? When do you put it on sale? Oh, I see you pasted the link there. Yeah,
Yeah.
that all of my most up-to-date talks on pricing are there. But yeah, it's like no one knows what to charge. No one knows how to schedule sales. No one knows how to schedule bundles. People have guesses. I put my guesses in my talk, but it is one of many open questions in the field that people are still working out. And it's unfortunate that that is an open question because how much to price your game for is an enormously important decision. And if you blow that decision, it'll really mess up your business. And if people don't know what to charge. So it's exciting in a terrifying driving a car with no brakes kind of way.
That sounds exciting. It's pretty similar to how I felt pre-release. Um, yeah, okay. Um, and so kind of similar to that is kind of like the discount, kind of the value of games being dragged down a bit. I know you've written on that a lot before. I also have read your blog. I'll pimp your blog here as well, which is amazing. Um, so that's something you spend a lot of time kind of thinking about and looking at. Um,
Oh yeah, absolutely. Because I have to make the decision for myself. Right now, all my new games are $20. I really feel that is the right price for us, but I could be wrong. We might make 10% more money if we charged it 25 or 15. I don't know, and I will never know. All I'm just aiming for the right price point just to stay in business. And so far, we're doing okay.
and probably because you had to, right? So in 1995, there was no Steam to just show your game to people at 80% off. You had to build a fan base yourself, one person at a
Right.
time. Um,
Yeah, all word of mouth.
yeah, and now
And
you
the
have
and the rare magazine article.
yeah, and now you have that fan base. There is a backlog of people who have played almost all your games, and when you make a new game, they're going to pay careful attention to that, and that's amazing. Um, if someone here is starting out, that's something I want to do, for example. I'm not sure how right now to do that.
Yeah, I think that's a super interesting topic. Is I can actually be comfortable and rest and sleep at night because I know that I have a fan base, that there is this core of people who will buy our work. And so no matter how bad, even if I write a game that's only so-so, it's going to make some money and keep us in business so I can write the next game that might actually be good. But how do you make a fan base? That's a huge question and that's something that I don't see indies right now doing, perhaps because they're not able to do it. This is something I want to write about. I'm still thinking about how to approach it, but just the idea of suppose suppose you're Joe Schmo and you wrote a game, and then later on Joe Schmo writes another game, and Joe Schmo wants to take advantage of the fact that he's a known quantity, that a way to get the people who liked his first game to like his second game to buy his second game too, and that's a difficult thing to build. You mentioned I write a lot of games, and I write a lot of games and I write a lot of very similar games, and that's a way to build a fan base. I'm just selling hamburgers here, I make a hamburger and I make another hamburger,
People who like
and
hamburgers are
people
going
who
to
know
watch
they like my hamburgers want to buy another hamburger. And if hand, if you write a game every 4 years and those games are all very different from each other, different genres, different styles, it's going to be much harder to write a fan base because one, 4 years is too long for people to remember you, and two, it's very similar games. So if they like your games, that's no guarantee they're going to keep liking them. But on the other hand, indie games are artists. They might not want to be a drudge and a mole person like me, just writing the same game again and again every year. They want to just wander and explore and do new things, and that's cool, and that's their process, and that helps them succeed. But it fights with their making a fan base. Jonathan Blow has a fan base because he writes puzzle games. He writes awesome puzzle games. Guy's a wild man. And so when a new Jonathan Blow game comes out, I'll say, oh, okay, yeah, I'm going to buy that because I know I like that way that guy thinks.
Even if it takes
And
8 years?
that's a great goal. I'm sorry?
Even if it takes 8 years before, between Braid and The Witness? I can't remember the exact amount of years, but it was a long time.
It's about 7 years.
Okay.
Getting a lot of PR helps. I mean, being famous helps. Uh, becoming famous is unfortunately not a tool most of us are going to be able to put in our toolbox, but I'm sure I could come up with other names. Like suppose I tell you that Ron Gilbert's got a new game out, which he does.
Point-and-click adventure.
Anyone who knows about Ron Gilbert's work, he's written many of the greatest adventure games, knows more or less what they're gonna be able to expect from that. So that guy's gonna do okay.
So that seems like great advice. So kind of build in a genre, so
Uh,
there's an expectation of the kind of things you're making.
That is one route you can take, and that is the route that I have taken. But not everyone can take that route because not everyone, wants to approach the craft in that way. But if you do have one sort of thing that's your fascination, role-playing games or shooters or fantasy games or adventure games or tactical games, do your best to build a brand, to make yourself memorable, to make people remember you. That's one of the great things about sequels is that there's nothing better than a sequel for leveraging a fan base. If you write a game called, Dork Shooter, and then you release Dork Shooter 2, everyone who played Dork Shooter is going to know more or less what's on the menu. And if people like Dork Shooter, a lot of them are going to buy Dork Shooter 2 without you doing any PR work at all. It's, there's not necessarily a huge amount of integrity in sequels, but there's not no integrity in sequels. It's still,
you can improve on
if you write a good game, you wrote a good game.
And you can improve on the formula, and you can make fans happy. People who love your games, what they want is more
Yeah,
of
and
the
you can
same.
have a whole new story in that world. I mean, a lot of indie developers hate the idea of sequels, and I respect them for that. But sequels give me a chance to tell really long, arcing series. I write tons of sequels, but I think I earn it by using that form to tell just really long, arcing, epic stories that I could not tell in one game.
That's very interesting.
So sequels aren't
Yeah.
automatically bad.
Yeah, absolutely. I've got another question from Andrew Hines here, and actually it ties into a question I wanted to bring up too. You had a blog post recently about dealing with toxicity from people online. Has the way
Oh,
people
sure.
vent changed since the days you got those complaints in actual letters? And I'd like to talk about kind of how you deal with that kind of stuff.
The the whole topic of harassment online is obviously it's a huge topic now, and it's a topic very much in development because the way I usually put it, there are some people who are just mean, and there are some people who are just crazy, and a lot of those people have internet accounts, and which means that the internet has a certain amount of free-floating mean and crazy wandering around looking for someone to attach to. And you have, when you become any kind of a public figure online, anything from writing a game to just writing one tweet, you have to ask yourself two questions. One, what is the likelihood that what I'm doing going to make mean and crazy attached to me? And two, when it happens, and it will happen eventually, how are you going to react to it? And one of the things that makes the problem so worrying is that people are very ingenious, and the ways people have the tools the internet gives you tools to hurt another person. And people are only developing more of those tools as time goes on. People are becoming more and more ingenious and using the internet to find ways to make your life miserable. And a lot of people will say, "Oh, it's just people saying mean things to you online. Grow a thicker skin, Buttercup." Well, that's all well and easy to good, but suppose that's all easy to say. But suppose someone gets angry at you and sends you mean messages and it doesn't work, so they do a little internet searching, find the phone number for your mother, and start calling her at 2 in the morning and saying obscenities to her. Well, how comfortable are you with that? And what I just said is not a hypothetical example. That happens. That is actually happening. And even that is one of the more inoffensive things that people do to each other online now. It's
It's
it
kind
is
of
a
become a
problem.
bit of a
Awareness of
jungle.
this problem and the problem itself has exploded over the last 2 or 3 years. And no one. I'm not hearing any solutions. I'm not hearing anyone come up with any good answers. I hear people coming up with bad answers all the time, but not necessarily bad. One person can do a lot of good things, but of course people just tend to pay more attention to the building that's on fire, and there's a lot of attention being paid now to the problem of harassment online. Like there's been a lot of articles lately about Steam review brigading. Like you're a developer and you say some opinion, people don't like it, so they get together 50 of their friends and they go to your Steam page and write negative reviews of you.
Which is
There's no there's no magic algorithm that can go to a negative Steam review and tell whether it's a legitimate complaint or someone just trying to take you down. So if you get Steam review brigaded, then someone just
you.
walked up and punched you in the face and there's nothing you can do about it. So until someone comes up with a solution, I don't think anyone will. Until that, you have to bake that into your business model. Walking in, you just have to go, okay, at some point people are just going to walk up and punch me in the face. I just have to make enough money to survive that. It's not that is my current point of view about that, and it's not a very satisfying one. It's certainly not satisfying for me. It's not helping me get any more sleep. But that seems to be kind of where we are at this moment.
And the sad thing, I think, is that as kind of indie devs, so what has become indie, small time devs, the brilliant thing was that you were so available. So it was possible to talk to the creator of Minecraft while he was in the early days. He was posting on it in this thread on TigSource. He was just, here's this
Mm-hmm.
little thing I'm working on. You could chat to him and play his early version of the game. Like that isn't possible with, the creators of the latest EA franchise or Call of Duty because there isn't one person and you're not allowed to talk to them. So that was the magic
Right.
of being a small-time dev. As a fan, you could talk to them, and as a dev, it was helpful to talk to your fans because you were trying to build a fan base. But now that seems more dangerous. You kind of want to do that because it's good, but you have to be very aware of, angering people for all the reasons you said. And it's a real shame.
So I think there's a way, but the thing is, this is already a solved problem. There are celebrities out there, like real celebrities that everyone have heard of, who interact with their fans all the time and are friendly and careful. It's just, I think that computer game developers have been largely naive in this regard in thinking that they can become rich and famous without being subjected to the forces that rich and famous people have been subjected to as long as there were rich and famous people. Let me clarify. The example I gave in my blog post is Taylor Swift. Like all right-thinking people of the earth, I'm a big Taylor Swift fan. And suppose I sent a letter to Taylor Swift saying, hey, this is great, and say asking her a question of some sort. There is a chance, my guess, this is all my guess, but I'm pretty sure I'm right, there is a chance that she might read my letter, and there's a second.
I I lost your audio there when you were just talking about Taylor Swift. You
Okay,
sent her a
so
letter.
suppose I
There's a
sent a letter
chance.
to Taylor Swift. She might see it and she might respond, but I strongly suspect that it will be scanned first. People will open up the letter to make sure there's not anthrax inside. They will open it, read the paper to make sure I'm not insane or angry or belligerent or threatening. And if it's all clear, it gets passed along, and it may or may not get read. But Notch, the guy who made Minecraft, once Minecraft became the biggest game in the world, needed to do the same thing. You
Yep.
can't, once you become that famous, you can't have an unfiltered interaction with the public anymore, because some people will just be mean, and some people will be unnerving. There are people who can be nice, but they can do it in a way that is completely terrifying. When you get you'll know what I mean when you get that email, and you will. Um,
Even the sheer volume
and
of it. If you're Taylor Swift and you tweet, you can't have notifications on your phone anymore, you know.
Yep, and Notch, and I'm sure, and Notch was the same way. I'm sure he got a bajillion tweets a day, and if he wanted to have friendly, good interactions with his fans, that was still entirely possible. But you need to have a filter. You need to have someone to go, like, if I wrote a tweet to say Notch, you're a horrible garbage person, then there should be someone in the middle to go, nope, click, and make that tweet disappear, because that's not going to do anyone any good.
Sounds like there's a
And
startup idea in here for, essentially bigger than community management, like a whole fan filtering service for game
that
devs particularly.
that may actually be a startup, just a thing where a subscription where you can pay $20 a month, or probably more likely you pay by volume, and then there's just some poor miserable person sitting in a warehouse somewhere reading all your tweets and deleting all of the ones that call you an idiot or whatever. Everything else can be outsourced right now, so I figure, why not have that sort of a place where you can pay to get that protection shield that just filters out all of the abuse. But then there's a problem there, where how do you tell the difference between mindless abuse and genuine constructive criticism? And the answer is, you don't. If people are just coming in at random on your Twitter feed, you only want to see the nice stuff. If there's a real problem that they're pointing out, then hopefully that will be made aware to you somewhere else. But for the Twitter stream, probably you want to just keep that light and keep that friendly. And maybe your service, if someone is using Twitter to report bugs, you might say, hey, if it looks like a bug report, send that through. I'm tough enough to take it. It's an exciting future full of opportunities to deal with the horrible ramifications of what we created.
And presumably it's better this way. It's better to have access to everyone, even with the negatives that come.
It's the way I put it in my blog post is, it's really to get upset and angry at the internet because of all of the horrible things that happen. But the internet is what made my awesome life possible. I wrote a computer game and just sent it out to the world. That never would have been possible before, for me to just take my madness and weird little dreams and make them available all over the globe in an instant. It's miraculous. So you do get to a point where it becomes churlish to be angry at the internet, because what it's giving us is still much better than what it's taking away. I know that's very little satisfaction to someone who is currently having taken things away, who is currently under attack, who is currently being swatted or whatever, and that's horrible, and that shouldn't happen. But the internet is still a net plus.
Absolutely. I think that kind of answers that question really well. And if you want more follow-up, there's a whole big blog post about it. You've kind of written about it a few times, actually, kind of dealing with.
Yeah, I touch. It's a very hard topic to avoid, because at this point, it's all. Sometimes it seems like it's all anyone talks about. The internet. The internet is still an unsolved problem. It's still developing. We aren't sure what the final form of it is going to take. Even if we could come up with a solution to the harassment problem, the internet and the way people use it changes so quickly that in 2 or 3 years, we'll just have to solve the harassment problem again. At that point, we'll all be an Oculus Rift, and Facebook will be jacked directly into the back of our neck, and then hackers will send in nasty messages directly into your spine through your neck jack.
Yep. The funny thing is, it doesn't tend to happen in person, or the frequency of happening is very much smaller in person. So if you're demoing your
Yeah,
game somewhere and meeting
yeah,
people,
it's amazing how
yeah.
the different human interactions get when one person has the ability to actually punch the other person in the face. Uh, you know, you know, there are people online who I think are real jerks. But I strongly suspect that, and there are people who think I'm a real jerk. There are people online who hate me. But I would bet just about anything. Go into a coffee place, we sit down, have a cup of coffee, have a chat. We may not come away like best buds forever, but once you put two humans in a room, things tend to get real reasonable real fast. Because I think that the vast majority of people are nice.
Yep.
They may not have nice opinions, but the vast majority, or opinions you agree with, but the vast, like my family, there are people in my family who I have profound disagreements with about, let's say, just about everything, but I still love them because they're my family and they're people. The internet just sometimes lets us forget that we're dealing with people.
All right, I'm gonna just kind of, I know I've had you for an hour now, so I'm not gonna keep you much longer. Maybe just a couple quick questions. So you have a new game. You've
Sure.
just announced Avadon 3 coming out in September. So that's
Yes,
only,
that's what we're gunning for.
so it's on, okay, yeah. And it's only a few months away, and you just essentially officially announced it last month or a few weeks ago, I think.
Right. With
So
the
is that,
trailer and everything.
so that's your kind of marketing plan is, obviously you've been building the game for a while. You get it to kind of, I guess, a little bit of certainty about when it'll be finished, and then release stuff like trailer and release date and
Right.
say it's coming.
Yeah, I think that usually there is disagreement, like with everything else. There's disagreement about how long before release you should announce your game. For me, I think 3 or 4 months feels about. It gives it a chance to put it on Steam, give people a chance to wish list it. It makes my fans happy because they want to know what's going on. I don't want to keep them on the hook for too long. Oh my God, I haven't sent out the mass email announcing that. Okay, I'll write that today. Thank you for reminding me. It's it, everyone. It's another process thing. Everyone has their own way of doing it. But I'm eager to announce the game. Because I really want people to know what I'm doing, but at the same time, I want it to be close enough to the actual release so that it doesn't completely fall out of their heads. And some people will announce a month before, some 3 months before. We just like to do it about 4 months before.
Did you see last year the beginner's guide?
Yeah, that which announced the day
Yeah, he
before
just
it
tweeted
came
it.
out. Yeah,
Amazing.
David Reedon is a wild man. That was a spectacularly gutsy move, which is the sort of move you can do when you're if you worked on Stanley Parable, you can do all sorts of things that other people
That is
can't.
true. But
I can't
also,
announce my name the day before, but if you're that guy, you can announce it the day before, and it totally worked. Beginner's Guide sold a bunch of copies, and it deserved to. I really liked it.
yeah, I just thought it was fun. I was like, oh, cool, a new game is coming out. And then I read it more carefully. I was like, tomorrow?
Here we go. But I have like the Witcher expansion, which currently, part of me is sitting here talking, but most of my head is thinking Witcher expansion about to come out. They only just announced its release date the other day, and that's coming out at the end of the month. So they released that like 3 weeks before, which seems to me really short. But once again, it's an expansion for The Witcher 3, so people are going to find their way to that no matter what.
That is true. Or you can do the other approach, which is No Man's Sky, which is get people excited, overexcited for several years.
Yeah, somehow they managed to sort of tap into the PR mother load with that game. When they announced it, they were announcing a thing that they made it seem like their game was the thing people really wanted. Will it actually be that? Who knows? I hope it is. I hope they do great. But yeah, it just caught on in people's imagination in a really big way, and so they played that like crazy. They've done a really good job marketing the game, and apparently it's going to sell for $60. So that'll be groundbreaking for an indie game. I'll be fascinated to see how that turns out.
Me too. The Witness pricing I was really happy about. you know,
Yeah, that was 40
40,
bucks
40,
and
yeah.
and fair. I thought The Witness is one of the best puzzle games ever made. I think 40 bucks. I felt entirely happy paying $40 for that, with the caveat that I can only support indie games charging prices like that if refunds are available.
Yes.
Because indie games, by and large, tend to be a niche product. Witness, as good as it was a niche product, and I think that people who buy it and go like, weird maze puzzles, I hate this, should have the option to get their money back. That is what enables us to charge prices like that in an ethical way that still makes indie developers seem like cool people.
Refunds have been so handy, even for support issues where you have, a weird PC configuration that
Oh yeah, and
you
that
don't
always
know how to
happens.
solve.
Yeah, no matter how tight your code is, no matter how hard you debug, there will be systems where your game will just break. It is inevitable. And when that happens, there is nothing more satisfying than to be able to go, okay, refund. Because that's the only option. Other than that, all you've done, otherwise you've just ripped them off. And that's horrible. I didn't go, one of the nice things about running my own small business is I get to try to run it in an ethical way, which means I don't want to rip anyone off. If some kid saves up her allowance for a few weeks to buy my game and it doesn't work on her computer,
That is the saddest story.
I don't want to steal some kid's money. Good Lord.
So this is kind of maybe the last question here, but you did really big demos back when shareware was the thing. So Doom came
My
out,
demos are bigger than a lot of new indie games now.
yes, and at the time that was kind of a viable thing. Doom kind of maybe made that mainstream where one third of the game was shareware. Um, and games like yours had I played a long time before hitting the
Oh,
shareware
yeah.
demon, and that trend has disappeared these days. Games are easy to get. Nowadays, I think YouTubers have kind of replaced the demo. You can just watch someone
Oh, definitely.
explain it for a few minutes. Um,
Though, unfortunately, a YouTuber will not tell you if the game will break on your system or not.
True. And then, like you said, we have refunds now, which is kind of like a little demo. At
Sure.
least no one's getting, losing money. You're
At
still,
this point, the purchase serves as the demo.
yeah. And are you still making demos?
Yeah, I'm old and cranky enough that I feel the need to make a demo. It's pretty short, and quite frankly, hardly anyone downloads the demo because it's on Steam and they just buy it. And if they don't like it, they get a refund. So the demo is kind of it's just something I do out of habit. It doesn't make a lot of time to make a demo, so I do it. Okay, once you have a fan base, you need to maintain your fan base. And that means that if your fan base makes a reasonable request of you, you should fulfill that. If I released a game without a demo, my fan base would be irritated. Even
Do
if
they
they
still like
don't...
checking it out?
I'm sorry?
They still like checking it out
Yeah,
on the
yeah.
demo?
Even if they don't get the demo, even if they like me enough to buy the game no matter what, it makes them happy to know it's there.
Okay.
Because it's sort of like a contract between me and them. I'm saying just the existence of a demo says, hey, I'm trying to treat you fairly. I want to be honest. I don't want your money if I haven't earned it. And they appreciate that statement even if they don't get the demo. So I think demos are good as long as they're short enough that they don't kill the sales of the whole game. And they're easy to make, so I'm going to keep making demos in the foreseeable future. But obviously, if you look around, a demo is nowhere near necessary to have a successful product. I mean, hardly any games have demos anymore.
Yeah, it's true. And
Just
some
chalk it up to my...
some of the vectors for demos have disappeared. Like CDs and floppy disks on the front
Oh
of
yeah, yeah.
magazines.
And CDs are history. I think Steam allows demos. They have a demo feature, but hardly anyone uses it. I don't even use it. If you want the demo for my game, you have to go to our website because I don't want to figure out how to configure demos in Steam.
Yeah, it's a whole yeah. That if
It's a
Steam
whole
really
new
cared
build
about
and a
demos,
whole new depots, and it's. I did it for the first few. It was not a hugely appreciated feature, and it's on my website. I think that's fair enough.
if they really cared, they'd have made something automatic, like you can play for the first 2 hours or whatever, some setting, and it just was built into Steam. But they don't. They have refunds instead now.
I
It's fine.
I think the same system right now is pretty good.
Me
I
too.
think that I think that's as good as anyone could reasonably expect.
So any last bit of advice for someone starting out now? What's the number one thing someone should do if they're making their first game?
Um, buy a good share with good back support. Get enough sleep because you need sleep to live. Yeah, that's pretty much it. Um, no, tend to be pretty humble about giving advice, because if you're looking at this now and you want to write computer games, you're an artist. You'll have to need to find your own process and make your own way. Um, I do have a blog post that's been sort of long in the works about my actual advice where you want to learn to write games. Well, here's what worked for me, and it's a long post with lots of stuff just about
That sounds exciting.
if you want to get into games, the number one advice I give is just start writing games. You don't need permission. Learn a programming language or get a really simple game creation element like game making system like Game Maker. Make a game, play it a bit, show it to your friends, throw it away, make another one, and so on. And that's what I did, and I think that's what almost everyone does. And there are
Almost
a lot
everyone
of
I've asked has been doing
I'm
that.
sorry?
Almost everyone I've asked has a pile of unreleased little games or released demos, prototypes.
That's how I spent my entire childhood. They're all gone forever, but the learning is still here.
Very cool.
And yeah, and you don't have to going to a school can help for some people. Doing it alone or with a group of friends can help for other people. But in the end, the one thing all of the paths have in common is that if you want to make games, you have to make games. That there's no shortcut around that. If you wanna be a singer, you have to spend a bunch of time singing songs.
It seems to be true of any art. Like
Yeah,
read really good advice recently, which was like, a lot of people want to be writers, but a lot of those people don't want to write. They have to actually do the thing to be the artist. You can't just say,
I
I'm
believe it
a
was
writer.
I believe it was Ernest Hemingway who said, and fewer wiser things have ever been said. You have to write 1 million bad words before you write one good one.
Yeah, very
So get started on writing those million bad words as soon as you can. And once you've written the words, look at them really hard and figure out why they're bad, because that's where the learning happens. And look at mistakes and then throw it out and start over and don't make those mistakes again. Then you'll find the next set of mistakes. And that process never stops. I'm finding mistakes. I'm gonna spend a bunch of time today programming, and I'm gonna make some new mistakes, and then I'll figure out how to not make those again.
super. Um, this is brilliant. I'm going to wrap it up now. You have
Okay.
been most kind to join us and chat to us. I've been
Yeah,
looking
thank you very
forward
much
to
for having
chatting
me.
to you for ages, so I'm so happy. Um, and so if anyone wants to check out your games, they are on Steam. Just search Spiderweb Software or
Yep, or go to
um,
spiderwebsoftware.com. There'll be links there.
perfect. And if you want to follow Jeff on Twitter, he's always entertaining, or read his blog, jeffvogel.blogspot.de or Spiderweb Soft, I think, is your Twitter handle.
Spiderweb Software, all one word.
Oh, sorry.
For the blog. Yeah, just Google Jeff Vogel blog, and it'll pop
Yeah,
up.
yeah. And just your blog could keep someone busy for a few weeks, actually. It's really great stuff.
There,
So
there's a lot
thanks
of
so
good
much.
stuff on there. Some of
Yeah.
it's old, but some of it's all right.
And even the stuff from a few years ago is still incredibly relevant.
I agree.
Brilliant. I'm going to wrap it up there. Everyone's saying thanks in chat. Thanks so much. And yeah,
And yeah, let me know when it's on YouTube, and I'll push the link.
brilliant. We'll share it with you. Take care.
Okay, well, talk to you later then.